My name is Maddy Brockert, and I became a domestic violence advocate nearly 12 years ago when I lost my mom to intimate partner violence. It was not until about 6 months prior to her death that I really realized that my mom was in an extremely abusive relationship, only verbally abusive, that turned into emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, but nonetheless abuse. He would tell her that she was worthless, that she could do no better, that she was a single mom of 2 kids and thus couldn't do any better than him specifically, and that she might as well settle and stay with him. So when the cycle of abuse went from your typical tension, outburst, honeymoon phase, and back to no honeymoon phase, just belittling her day after day, she put up with it because she genuinely believed that she deserved it, because he told her that every single day. My mom had won a trip for working at her company 15 years, and she, all expenses paid, was able to bring anyone she wanted. She brought her boyfriend of 2 years, and on the second night, he brutally beat her to death. This was news that completely devastated me. My dad came to school. I was a sophomore in high school, again, just a week shy of finishing out my sophomore year. It's almost impossible to fathom, even to this day, knowing how much I know about domestic violence now. It's still hard for me to wrap my head around. So when my mom did ultimately lose her life, I wanted to understand everything there was to know. So I reached out to LifeWire and found that they had a 20-hour advocacy training that was going to allow me to work their hotline. Well, I didn't necessarily want to do that. I did think it was a good start for me to begin to understand what it was my mom was going through, and for me to begin to heal and forgive my mom. So I went through the training and really quickly realized that I'd actually gone through a couple-day training, if you will, while I was in sophomore health while my mom was still alive. But we weren't really talking about what domestic violence was, how it can impact someone like me, and the nuances that occur when you're looking at a 40-something-year-old woman versus a teenager who is 16, the nuances meaning how that would look different, how abuse would not be the same for those 2 scenarios. So while we were talking about domestic violence and how it related a little bit for my mom, and I was able to recognize that she was at very least not in a healthy relationship while she was still alive, we definitely were not talking about what it meant to be in one if you were a teenager. And so once I went through LifeWire's training, I realized really quickly that not only did I need to do something about this, but specifically I needed to go out to schools and help educate students on what it meant to be in a domestic violence relationship at their age, so that they could identify the signs and get their friends out of it and hopefully just prevent themselves from being in it. At the end of the first day of presentations that I ever gave, that took place at Newport High School, where my mom actually attended high school, and in the same health class of Mrs. Velategi that my mom also had back in the 80s, I was really discouraged. I didn't have many students come up to me and ask for help or, show much interest. And I was really worried that either wasn't getting through to them or that kids simply didn't care. So it wasn't until about a week later when I received a letter from Mrs. Velategi that read something along the lines of, "I know it may not feel like you're saving lives, but you are." At the end of the day, I had multiple students come up to me asking for help on how they could get either their parent or themselves out of a domestic violence relationship. And I know it may not feel like it, but you really are saving lives, and you need to find a way to continue on with this message in some capacity for the rest of your life. And I remember reading that with my dad and just sobbing and realizing that I really do need to find a way to continue this work in some capacity the rest of my life. LifeWire is an amazing place to find help. LifeWire provides compassionate services, safe housing, advocates, and hope so that survivors and their families can heal and rebuild their lives. To end domestic violence and the cycle of abuse, we need to prevent it from occurring in the first place. Join me in the mission to end domestic violence.